All right, for those who don't know who I am, I'm Edward Mullen. I'm an author. I make YouTube videos. I do other things. But most of you have, if you've read any of my books, you've probably read one of two books, The Art of the Hustle and Prodigy. Those are two of my most popular books. This is The Art of the Hustle. And there's a secret origin story of why I started writing in the first place, and I'm about to tell that story. A long time ago, maybe like 8 years ago, I had a friend who I feared was suicidal. He actually had gone through a really bad breakup. He had locked himself in a room and wasn't talking to anybody, and it just wasn't good. He was severely depressed, and so I wrote him a story about a time in my life when I was kind of down in the dumps, in this kind of active solidarity, like, hey, we all go through this kind of stuff, and here's my story, and this is how I kind of pulled myself through, and maybe, you know, this can help you or you know, motivate you or inspire you in some way. So I sat down and I wrote this email. Actually, I sent it to him on Facebook because I didn't have his email address, and the message was so long that I had to like split it up into chunks of like 5 or something. It eventually turned into like a 10,000 word email, which is insane. But at the time, I didn't even really know that I liked writing. I mean, I was going to school and I was, you know, pursuing philosophy, which is a lot of writing, but I didn't know anything about writing fiction or, you know, writing short stories or anything like that. But as I was writing, I just become obsessed with like telling the story in a way that would be interesting and engaging and have certain action beats and all that kind of stuff. And so I wrote this email or this, you know, Facebook message. I sent them all off. I messaged them, you know, 1/of 5, 2/5, 3/5, and so on. And then I waited. And the next day he gets back to me and, you know, he reached out to me, said, you know, that really helped me. Thank you. Nobody's really reached out to me like that. It's really encouraging that you took the time to share that part of your life with me. So that was pretty cool, right? That I was able to kind of connect with him on that level. But I had this like chunk of text, like 10,000 words, and I didn't really know what to do with it. I'm like, well, this should be something. Maybe I should put it on the internet for, maybe it could help other people. And so I started to kind of write a little bit more of the backstory leading up to that event in my life. And so I took the story back to, you know, like the end of high school, and then I wrote some of the stuff, the kind of connective tissue, if you will, from that moment of high school until the moment this event happened. And then when I got to that event, you know, I'm still a very young person in the story, so I just kept writing what would eventually happen to this character's life. So the story started off as, you know, the book, The Art of the Hustle, started off as a story about myself, and a lot of the stories in the book are actually true. They actually happened to me in places I've been and places I've stayed. They're actually true. They're real places. I eventually, you know, sat down to write this novel, I believe in 2010, December 2010, and I finished it in about 6 weeks. Okay, so now the book is done. I sat on it for 2 years. I edited it. I put it online. And so, yeah, it's available. You can read it. And that chunk, that initial chunk that I started with, that turned out to be the email to my friend, that's still in the book. And that's actually, I believe it's like chapter 12. I'm going to read it to you now, and so you can understand the secret origins. Okay, so before I read this, I really want to set up the scene. So I'm a young guy. I move out of my parents' house when I was 17. I moved to a place called Banff, Alberta, which is, you know, a really kind of a small ski town. It's for, you know, a lot of skiing and snowboarding and wilderness type of stuff. If you Google it, it's just surrounded by mountains. It's really beautiful. And I worked at a snowboard shop called Unlimited. Eventually, the snowboard shop turned into a bike shop in the spring, and I had no interest in selling bikes. I didn't know anything about bikes, and nor did I care to learn. So I eventually moved to Vancouver, which is not where I'm originally from. And so I moved with a high school friend who was coming from another place in Alberta, and we were both to meet in Vancouver. We eventually did meet in Vancouver. We became roommates. I got a job working at the Gap, and which is not in the book. I skipped that part. But so fast forward, me and this roommate, we start a business. The relationship between us goes sour very quickly, and the business eventually falls apart. We get evicted, and now I have no money. I have no contacts in Vancouver. I'm not from here. I've only been here a short time, so I don't have that many friends. I know a few people from the Gap, but they're not friends. They're just coworkers, right? And so one night, abruptly, I'm on my own, no money and no place to live. And when I eventually do find a place to live, it's really shady. You can read the story. And so I wake up, and this chapter is when I wake up, like the morning of getting this new apartment, and I'm just like evaluating my life. I'm just kind of hit this funk. I get into this like really bummed out mood, this kind of depression, if you will, where it's like, I made some wrong choices. I've hung around some of the, maybe the wrong person and allowed that person to influence me, and I'm feeling pretty sad about it. So here is chapter 12, the story that I wrote to my friend. I'm not gonna say his name, but I wrote to my friend, and so here it is. When I woke up, I went around and inspected my new apartment for the first time. In the light of day, I could really notice how old and dingy the place was. The carpets were thick, orangey brown shag, probably concealing horrible stains. The kitchen cabinets had fake wood laminate on them, which was peeling off in most places. All the fixtures and knobs had not been updated since the place was built in the 60s. There were dirty fingerprint marks on the walls, and the entire place smelled like an old shoe. I didn't even want to look in the bathroom. I didn't see any signs of rodents or critters, but I was sure that they were not too far away. I was not very impressed, to say the least. I walked over to the curtainless window in my room and checked out the view. The windows, like everything else, were completely filthy. The view from my second floor apartment overlooked a back alley behind the building. As I looked out, I saw a homeless man digging through one of the dumpsters, and I stared at this man for a moment and was captivated. Circumstances in this man's life forced him to do something that he would probably not want to do otherwise. Perhaps I could be this man. There's not that much difference separating me and him, I thought. Is this how my life will turn out? Sure, I was not digging through a dumpster, but I wasn't too far off. Ever since I had arrived in Vancouver, my life had trended downward. Given another month, it was certainly plausible that I could be doing the same thing as he was doing. I was barely treading water, fighting for survival, and I felt like I could drown at any moment. I took a long look around my dark bedroom. There were boxes and bags scattered everywhere with no order, no purpose, and it kind of reflected my life at that moment. Standing there, taking it all in, I just started to think about all the stuff that I had been through over the past year since I had moved out. It wasn't obvious what my next move was going to be, where I'd go from here, and how did it even end up like this. A year ago, I was thriving. I had lots of money, ambition, optimism, but now my life was going in the exact opposite direction that I wanted it to go. The more I thought about it, the more upset it made me. I slowly began to break down emotionally. Soon after, my emotions completely consumed me, and I could no longer stand the pain. I reached my breaking point. I dropped to my knees and I began to cry. I was completely broken. What started off as a slow, pathetic weep soon escalated into something that was beyond my control. I felt like I was paralyzed, and all I could do was scream. It felt like the tears were going to ooze out of every pore of my body and just drain me until I had nothing left. There was no more fight left in me. I was done. I had been defeated. It was time to face the cold, harsh reality that my venture into the real world had ended in disaster. As the pain grew stronger, I could no longer function. Like a ton of bricks was weighing me down, I was hit with the worst possible depression. It was unlike anything I'd ever felt before in my life. It was almost like every ounce of hope that was remaining had suddenly been stripped away. My future looked bleak, and as if I had been left for dead and nobody was coming to save me. As hard as I tried, I could just not snap out of it. My emotions, now in overdrive, rendered me helpless as I collapsed on the dirty floor. This was it. I was all alone in this scary world, and it was completely helpless. I had hit rock bottom. My life sucks. Somehow, I managed to lift myself up off the ground and crawl over to the mattress. I guess I still had enough sense in me to get myself off the dirty floor. I flopped onto the bare mattress and just laid there, face down, and cried for hours. As I laid on the mattress, I thought about all the things in my life. Like a mathematician who had made a few mistakes along the way, I methodically analyzed my life to see where had I gone wrong. I went over every detail, every choice I'd made in the past, every conversation, every reaction, and every relationship. I was a big failure. I allowed a loser into my life, and now my life was in ruin because of it. What made matters worse was that the realization that I had no one to blame but myself. If only I could do it all over again. If only I had another chance. I would be smarter. I would do things differently. I would learn from my mistakes. That's when it hit me. I realized that I could have a second chance. I could turn these negatives into positives. I could become whoever I wanted. If this was rock bottom, then the only place from here to go was up. I could have sat there and cried all day feeling sorry for myself, or I could develop a game plan and figure out how to get out of the mess that I was in. I was down but not out. Like a champion who had been knocked down in a later round of a fight, I had somehow summoned enough strength to continue and endure the pain. With a stubborn refusal, I decided this wasn't my life. This wasn't my destiny. There had been a mistake. This was not supposed to happen to me. No, I refused to accept this is how my life was going to turn out. The tears stopped and I began to pick myself up again. I was a fighter, not a quitter. I was a winner, not a loser. Using these thoughts as a mantra, I began to get my head back on itself and straighten myself. Let me start that over. I began to get my head back on straight and tell myself everything would be okay. I felt like I was making progress. Thinking back on the events that led to where I was, there were some pretty obvious things I did wrong. I went against my own intuition. Never again would I allow someone negative to influence me. I needed to trust my instincts and be more cautious of who I surround myself with. I need to surround myself with positive people who would help me grow, inspire me, have my best interest at heart, and not bring me down. And if I ever want to be in business again, I needed to choose a business partner wisely. I kept thinking about all the lessons that I could learn from my experiences so that I'd never be in this situation again. I needed to relearn the importance of financial responsibility. I used to be really good with my money and not spend it on frivolous stuff that I didn't need. I had nearly $8,000 saved up for my time in Banff, but within a few short months, I had nothing left. I had experienced a minor setback, but that is all it was for me. This wasn't the end. I would continue on, much wiser, as I now gained more valuable knowledge from this experience. Maybe this is what life is all about. People need to go through stuff in order to develop. I heard a saying once that God would never put you in a situation that you do not have the power to overcome. I felt like this is true for me in this particular instance. I wasn't a religious person per se, but I found comfort in the sentiment. I knew I would overcome this hardship, and it was the first major obstacle in my life since I'd moved out, but that's all it was, an obstacle, not the end of the road. I thought long and hard about my life and the situation that I was in, and I decided what I had to do. The first order of business was to get out of that depressing apartment. So there it is, The Art of the Hustle. Check it out. Chapter 12. This is the secret origin story that started it all off. Let me know if you have any cool stories about your books, or if you've read the book and if you resonated with that part of the book or maybe another part. There's lots of really cool lessons in the book like that. A lot of it, most of it's pulled from my life. Leave a comment in the below. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next week. Thank you.